What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. I hope everyone had a banging weekend of Iron Banner here, but we are getting back into the grind of builds for y'all with some red border weapon god rolls from this season, now that I've started to accumulate all 5 of those red borders for a few different weapons. But in today's video, we are taking it to the Void Titan here with a crazy second chance build. Since these exotics got a nice little rework, they were already pretty good for that endgame activity with being able to throw those shields for those anti-barrier champions, and now they also weaken targets, so we are taking advantage of that heavily, creating those void breachers everywhere for us, giving us Devour, giving us Overshield, pretty great survivability for that endgame. Plus we can share that love with some artifact mods as well as our super and aspects. Now, I know in the gameplay I was going in there solo, but I was just showing that survivability of the build even in that solo content. So you can take this in with a fire team, raids, GMs, master strikes, whatever it may be. Obviously, we haven't had GMs quite yet, but in the past, this build or something similar has worked, and it's even better this season because of those artifact mods and the rework to second chance. Now, for our abilities, aspects, and fragments, I'm going with that Ward at Dawn for that protection as well as weapon damage, plus one of our aspects uses that Ward of Dawn to our advantage. Now, for me, you can use whatever class ability and lift you want in your movement, but for me, gotta use that throwing shield, especially because of our second chance arms, allowing us to create those void breaches as well as stun those anti-barrier champions. Then for me, pretty much always going with that vortex grenade. This thing absolutely eats in PvE. Now, right here for our first void aspect, which is where our Ward of Dawn comes into play, offensive bulwark. Well, we have an overshield, or inside our Ward of Dawn, our grenade charges significantly faster. We also have increased melee range and damage, plus those melee final blows extend the duration of our overshield. So this is super nice because of these arms getting 2 shields anyways when we have it as our melee, being able to get our grenade back faster when we have overshield or Ward of Dawn. That is perfect for having the super in Ward of Dawn, and for our second aspect here in Bastion. So when we throw down our barricade or grant our super, we are getting an overshield, which allows us to then proc offensive bulwark. So it's a positive little feedback there. Plus we give that overshield to our fellow guardians as well, allowing them to stay alive a little bit longer. Like I said, support build for this as well, but it is a personal survivability on top of that support. Now, for our fragments right here, starting off with Echo of Instability, so our grenade defeats are going to create those volatile rounds for our void weapons, which we are using a trace rifle as well as a rocket, so nice for that void explosions and synergy. Now, for our second fragment, we have Echo of Leeching. O's melee final blows are going to create health regen for us, and with the offensive bulwark, with that increased melee range and damage, with 2 throwing shields, this thing is pretty easy to proc, allowing us to stay alive again, and we will be able to get Devour procced, as you will see in a second here. Next on the list, I chose to throw Echo of Persistence on here because we're using Overshields and Devour, so it's going to give us an increase to both of those. Having that Devour for about 15 seconds is actually nasty because we basically get a kill within that time no matter what, so we're always going to have that Devour up for survivability, plus our Overshield lasts a little bit longer for that offensive bulwark to proc and keep kicking in. Now, last but certainly not least with this build, like I said, Echo of Starvation, picking up Void Breaches or Orbs grant us Devour. We're going to be creating those Void Breaches absolutely everywhere with this build, and Orbs of Power on top of it with our weapons, our super, as well as our melee. So you will see we have that Devour up with Persistence for about 15 seconds, almost consistently with this build for that survivability as well. Now, when we move on to our weapons in our kinetic slot right here, you can use kind of whatever you're feeling to pair with the Hollow Denial, but I went with a submachine gun with Subsistence Demo so I can get my grenade back a little bit faster, and just felt like the right weapon for this build. Now for our energy weapon, I'm going with that Hollow Denial plus Surplus and Repulsor Brace. So with that Repulsor Brace, every time we get a defeat on a Void debuffed target, we get an Overshield for an improved duration, and since our arms weaken targets when we hit them with our shield, as well as having volatile rounds on, we're going to be able to get those debuffs literally on almost every single target we defeat, perpetually giving us that Overshield, which procs both of our aspects, which is absolutely nasty for this build. And last but not least, for our heavy, we have that two-tailed fox with the Void rockets, solar rockets, and arc rockets, so we're going to be able to Scorch Ignite, also Jolt with that arc, and then obviously with the Void and those volatile rounds, be able to create volatility with this, and it is pretty juicy for DPS as well. Now, when we move on to our aspect, which makes this S tier build S++, we have a few different things that we're using in this Overload Trace Rifles for that Hollow Denial. Next off, we got that authorized mods for melee as well as Void, allowing those to be a little bit cheaper for us. Now, this stretch of 3 right here is what makes this build so good this season with this artifact is Unto the Breach. Defeating a Void debuffed target creates Void breaches while we have that Void subclass equipped, and since, like I said earlier, we're going to have Void debuffed targets everywhere with volatility and weakening, we're going to have Void breaches everywhere, which again gives us that Devour, and you will see right here with Protective Breach picking up those gives us an Overshield, what do you know, or refreshes our existing, which we're using for both of those aspects, like I'm saying, to get our grenade back faster, as well as give us that nice increase to melee range, creating even more of that damage with the weakening and that positive feedback loop. And last but not least, when we pick up those Void breaches, we are also causing our next source of Void damage, whether that be our grenade or our melee or our weapon, to create a weakening pulse, which will just keep that motion going of defeating a debuff target to create a Void breach. We pick that up for Devour, Protective Breach, as well as Supernova, so it's an absolutely nasty combo. On top of that, we're going to have counter charge, so when we do stun a champion, we're going to gain extra armor charge, which you will see why on our armor mods. And then last but not least, we have squad goals. Performing a finisher while you have Devour grants Devour to nearby allies when we have that Void subclass equipped, so perfect for that support, like I said, not just survivability for you, but for your teammates, since we're going to have that Devour up basically consistently. When you get those finishers on those enemies next to them, you're also going to give them Devour just for free like that. Now, when we move on to our armor mods, we are going with that Void Siphon for those orbs of power on our Void weapon defeats, and two-tailed as well as Hollow Denial. We're also going to have Powerful Friends, where collecting Orb of Power give our allies that armor charge as well, so another little bit of support from us. And then Dynamo reduce our super cooldown when we use our class ability, since we got that 100 resilience and everything, we're going to get back that very quickly, allowing us to get our super back and Ward of Dawn also very quickly. Now, when we move on to these revamped gauntlets, the second chance with Myrmidion's Reach. Gain a second charge to your shield throw melee. Your shields also weaken targets and become armor piercing, stunning barrier champions, so that positive feedback loop of defeating weakened targets give us Void breaches, which gives us that Devour, extra protection, as well as that explosion of that Void damage, which again weakens targets, plus we can stun anti-barriers on top of it, making it good for endgame. Now for our mods, we're going to have Heavy-Handed to create orbs of power on our melee final blows, since we're going to have that double melee and have it up pretty consistently. On top of that, we're going to get our grenade back a little bit faster when we cause damage with our melee attack, so allowing us to have our grenade very often, which again allows us to have that volatility, which is a debuff for that Void, creating even more of that Overshield for us, Repulsor Brace, everything, so actually crazy. And then we have Grenade Kickstarter, using that armor charge when we throw our grenade. We're going to get a nice little chunk of that energy back, allowing for that positive feedback loop and ability spam with this build. Moving on to the chest piece, we're going to have Charged Up with Void Damage Resistance and Void Reserve. You can change that Void Damage Resistance to Arc, Solar, whatever it may be, depending on the content you're going into. Wanted Void Reserve, so the Two-Tailed as well as Hollow Denial could have that little bit of extra ammo, so we never run out, and then Charged Up to have that Armor Charge get a max stack by +1 for our Grenade Kickstarter on our arms. Now when we move on to boots, a new mod, Elemental Charge, collecting Fire Sprite, Ionic Traces, Stasis Shards, or Void Breaches, or destroying a Strand Chankle, has a chance of giving you armor charges. So with all of those Void Breaches that we're creating, picking them up has a chance to give us that armor charge for our Grenade Kickstarter. On top of that, we got Innervation and Invigoration. When we pick up Orbs of Power, we're going to get our melee and our grenade back to create that volatile rounds for us, as well as the weakening on our melee throws for that ability spam. And finally, on our class item right here, another new mod and powerful attraction, which automatically collects those Orbs of Power when we're nearby and throw down our shield, allowing for those mods on our boots to proc with Bomber as well as Reaper. So we're going to get grenade energy back when we throw down our barricade as well. And then our next weapon, Funnel Blow, is going to create an extra Orb of Power. So if it's a Void weapon and we have that double in a row, we're going to get Reaper to proc as well as Void Siphon. And we can even get it with our kinetic weapon, because any weapon is going to give us that Orb of Power. So you can see how nuts this build is with survivability for yourself. Just in general, having overshield in so many different ways with your two aspects that you have on, being able to get volatile rounds as well as weakening just from your grenades and your melees, and then all those Void Breaches and Orbs, we're going to get Devour. Void Breaches are going to give us those artifact marts to proc as well, with that Void Explosions also causing weakening, and just makes this build absolutely crazy. Plus, when we do those finishers, well, we have Devour near our allies, is going to give them Devour as well, just spreading that health and survivability again for some of that endgame activity. So this build right here just got even better with that weakening on the arms for sure. And on top of it, the artifact mods this season are absolutely crazy for Arc and Void. So S+ build this season, and just overall an S tier build for that endgame activity. I have loved these arms since they came out a couple seasons back with the Captain America shield on them. So very, very fun exotic to use, and just got even better this season for sure. So thank you guys again for that crazy support. Hopefully y'all have a great Monday. If y'all want, hit that subscribe and bell so you can come back for more builds like this. Like I said, we got some weapon guides coming out as well now that I got my red borders going. So truly, truly appreciate y'all. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.